to be a birder. And it's from here to all over the place. I was born and raised in Ladner and lived there until Elmer and I moved to Pemberton 56 years ago. I'm sorry. My father was the principal of the elementary school and was very much interested in the nature. My family and I went to the United Church, and I went to Sunday school when I was 4. Really ancient. And I think that is when I became interested in the birds. One of the songs we sang was, "God sees the little sparrows fall, they meet his tender view. If God so loves the little birds, I know he loves me too." I was very taken with that. And one thing about it, that I got very angry at some of the young boys in the area that had BB guns, and they were shooting birds off of their fences. I don't remember having a bird book in my parents' home, but after coming to Pemberton, I enjoyed the birds very much. I put feeders up for them, and it wasn't till one day I watched 2 sparrows. One had white crown marks, and the other had golden crown marks. I finally thought, those are a different type of sparrows. And I immediately bought a bird book. That was the start of my life list. I didn't know anyone else in Pemberton who had one. Take these things off, I can't see it.
You need some more light, Mom?
Yeah, it's not that.
Can we just move the podium over?
Sure. Yeah. Oh, I better make sure I don't.
You just move it with it.
Okay, good. Oh, that's better. My daughter and her husband said, "Let's go to Whistler. They have a man coming in to talk about birds." It was there that I met Wayne Campbell. I was rather pleased with that because I was a Campbell before I got married. He was from Victoria. He asked if I would send a monthly bird list to him. I was very pleased to do so. I have since gotten in other men and women to do the same thing. I found that it made me more careful of spelling and types of birds. It has been quite an experience to carry my book and my binoculars to Hawaii, Mexico, California, and other places. I had a good warning in Mexico. The apartment we were staying in had quite a long walkway with shrubs and flowers along it. Every time I walked along it, birds flew quickly out of it. One day I decided to walk along with my binoculars in my hand. And sure enough, a pretty bird flew up and landed on another apartment's porch. I focused my glasses and tried to see the bird. Instead of seeing the bird, I saw the lady of the place inside pull her drapes across the windows. I guess she figured I was a peeping Tom. I never did that again. While in Hawaii, I was very pleased to see the Nene, N-E-N-E, who is their national bird. Not a very pretty bird, but I did see it. I have found that you have to study the feeding habits, and it's necessary to have sunflower seeds and small seed. If the bird does not have a large beak, it will not be able to open the sunflower seeds. I usually put both types of seed on a tray because birds like the grosbeaks, now you were speaking about them, they can't get their beaks in those long sunflower seed things. Because we live in a farm and have, I'm lucky, I'm sorry, I have bird also like fat. And I am lucky because we live on a farm and I save the fat when we butcher, and I put the fat in the oven and render it down. For cooking, I put the liquid in my pans for cooking my bread and let it set. I like to put the cooled fat in a onion bag, which I try to get at one of the stores, and I nail it to a tree so that the larger birds can't pick it to pieces. I also like to make food for them by reheating fat, mixing it with oatmeal and seeds and peanut butter. When it has cooled, I take it out to the tree to rub into the cracks in the tree. The birds love that. I don't mind telling you that I did this 3 days ago and my son's dog came out and started licking it all. That's fine. I hang my hummingbird feeders in the front porch. Last year at our family reunion, Elmer's family, his family comes from Alberta and all over, and we totaled 49 people for the weekend. Yes, the other women bring goodies too. When the children came, 7 to 10 in age, arrived, I took them to the porch and I told them, if you stand quite quietly and put your hand up on the feeders, the birds will land on your fingers. The kids were fascinated that if it worked. But next thing I knew, there was every adult present did the same thing in the evening. In the evening I have 45 to 50 hummers getting their last drink of the day. Yes, it sure takes a lot of sugar. Birding does give you more to do, but it really is fun too. I sit by the window where the feeder is and watch 6 to 7 types of birds land for a feed. The smallest bird is the pine siskin. They are not afraid of anything, and they try to chase the big birds away. I was pleased 2 years ago when the mayor's wife phoned and asked if I would talk to the girl guides about birding, as they wanted to get badges for birding. We had a good time. We sat the girls on the floor and sharing books and finding proper names. They behaved so well, we ended up talking about birds. I understand they all got their badges. Last winter, the creek that runs past our place froze, half of it, on my half of the thing. And I was making out my bird list for Wayne Campbell to get And I went into the front room to get something. And on the way back, looked out the window, I saw some things black on the frozen part of the creek. I grabbed my binoculars and saw that it was 4 river otter. They had caught a salmon and were trying to eat it up. I looked across the creek and, of course, the trees had no leaves left, and the trees were full of crows waiting for a treat. As I watched, a bald eagle flew down and landed on the salmon and then chased the otters away. He ate salmon until he couldn't eat anything more. And the crows flew right down and ate everything left. I wrote all of this on Wayne's papers, and I added more around and said, "Who needs a TV when you can watch a show like that?"
Yeah.
Of course, there were no, I'm sorry. I had to admit that when we moved to Pemberton, I had never heard of a life list. I did enjoy all the birds that I had never seen before. One day, before we were in our new house, one day my 3-year-old son and I were outside in the backyard. There was a chickadee in her nest up in a tree. My son said, "What is that bird saying?" I asked him what he thought she was saying. He said, "She is saying Peter." I said, "I guess one of her babies hasn't come home for lunch yet, and she is calling him to come home." I have tried to be more sincere since we moved into our new house. We have lots of trees around, and a creek goes right past us, and the mountains are also close, and the birds from the mountains also visit us. Ducks who come along with their babies. I keep binoculars in the front room, one set in the dining room and one set in the kitchen. I have found that if the glasses are not handy, the birds you wanted to study have flown away. I find that trying to find out which hawk are what is hard. You have to study the lines on their tails and their chests and their face. Often they are sitting in a tree, and I think that helps. It is great to know other birders. We often phone each other and talk about what we have been doing. One day, Rosemary Walden phoned and said, "Come on down and see the Sora, S-O-R-A, in our creek." Well, I'd never seen a Sora, didn't have it for my list. I had never seen one, and as I was watching, the Sora came running out of its nest to eat elsewhere just across the creek. And I was watching very carefully, and I noticed that the bird did not stir the water at all. The water stayed calm. There does not seem to be a reason. There are creatures in Africa that are just the same for no known reason, which does make you think that we do not know all about the birds after all. Yeah, that's the end of my little speech about it. But I do find that, like birding, it is a great thing, and it's a lot of fun. I guess maybe it costs a bit of money, but I don't know, it's so neat to see them and talk to each other about them and so on. And I'm thankful that I've been able to do it. Thank you.
So I just have a couple questions for Ruth, and then I'll turn it over to you guys if you have any questions for Ruth. But Ruth and I have been talking for a couple weeks about her presentation today, and Elmer yesterday said that bird, the Sora bird, it had a name in Africa. What was the name?
Well, that's not, he wasn't quite right, because the Sora is here, the bird in Africa, it's not really a bird, but it's called a Jesus something.
Jesus walks on water bird.
Yeah, and it does not disturb them there either. And I've had Connie look in her machine for me, and it doesn't tell you what they're doing. You know, and I can't understand one word of it, because if a bird's running across the water, how come it's not upsetting it? It's just as calm and nice as it can be. So it's a funny sort of a thing, but no. And anyone, anything else?
What does this Sora look like? I don't know if I've seen one of these.
Which?
Like the Sora, the bird.
Well, it's a funny, I wish I had brought my book. Here I gotta think again.
It's a rail, isn't it? It's like
Well,
a
sort of, yes.
You have your book.
Almost like
John
a
Chalk,
gopher?
no, not the right book here. John Chalk is one of the men that I have asked to send things to Victoria.
Maybe along the river you would see it
No,
more.
but John is now an expert at the pictures, taking pictures. And he very carefully brings me pictures when he's had them. And I can't send, excuse me. So I've got a book of them now, big old thing. And he's got lovely pictures of them, but they're a fairly large bird. And then when I was at Rosemary's, she phoned John Chop and said, bring your camera up, you know. So he did, and the thing came right up on the lawn then and was going around, and then all of a sudden it would turn and run for its nest. But again, it didn't disturb the water. And I just don't understand how anything could do that.
Maybe it's just flying and don't touch the water.
Oh, it's right in the water. It's running across it to another place to get food.
It was on top of the little bit of green stuff that's on the water, like.
The water was right
It's not
clear.
really out, it was clear where you saw.
Yeah,
where I
it was
saw
right
it was
clear
definitely
where I
near green.
was, but it was amazing. But their creek that goes around that house, that's a real birding thing. It's wonderful to get, well, Rosemary said, you come down anytime you like, you know, we're friends, so.
What sort of binoculars do you have, Ruth?
About 4 different kinds. The ones I took to Mexico, we stayed in one hotel, well, 3 years in a row, I think, and there was a great big thing of water right there next to it, and oh, could you see birds then. But where we went, you went down to the edge of the water darn near to have lunch. And there was a Mexican man there that was head of the place. He said to me, you've got binoculars in your bag. I said, yes, all the time. And he said, well, could I borrow one? you know, some for just a few minutes, I want to show by people in the thing. Well, it was great for them because you could look out and see the whales. And they would be flapping around, and of course I got the binoculars. And then the second day he did the same thing, and he said to me, "How much did those cost?" I said, "I really don't know, they were a Christmas present." And I thought, yeah, you poor guy, you'd love to go and look at things, but you haven't got the money. I had another man that, I don't know what he did, he was in a little office and he came out to help me look over this water, and he couldn't speak English properly. And so the two of us were watching things, and he would speak to me and I'd try to understand him. But I keep thinking of all the little things that happened. One time, I guess I was going after birds again, and I started through the crowd that was there, and one man said to me, "I know what you're doing." I said, "Well, I hope you do. I'm very happy to be doing it." And that's a silly old thing. But nevertheless, then other people, I'd be at the beach, and the binoculars and the book would be right there, and there'd be birds flying over the buildings. And one man said to me, what are those birds up there?" So I said, "Well, would you like me to hand you the book and you can look at them?" "Oh, yes, that'd be great." But they don't carry any books or bother about it, so it really is something to, you know, you can say, well, this is what that is, and they sort of just look at you like, "Oh, for goodness sakes, how do you know that?" But I have more darn books now than I've ever had in my life. And if you came to my house, you will see everything that Santa Claus has brought me that has something to do with birding.
So Ruth,
Yes.
Ruth, are we on a sort of a fly-through for migrating birds? Because quite
Oh, yes.
often over the years, I've seen different types of birds, but I may never see them again, or I might never
Yeah.
see them for years.
No, they do, they migrate but I find that, well, not Wayne Campbell, John Chop and some of the others, we're beginning to see different birds now that aren't listed. And I think it's because of this weather bit, you know, I don't know, but John has seen things that I was embarrassed the one time he saw a certain bird, well, it was in John Bex's yard actually, and he said, "I checked our list, it's not on it. I phoned Whistler, they haven't got it. And Nigel Matthews was out of town, it happens, up country. And I phoned Shelley and said, "Is Nigel out of town?" "Oh, yes." I said, "Well, I want to know what to say to John Chop about this bird." So she says, "Well, I'll phone him at lunch." He was doing a doctoring job up there. And so he phoned me. And he said, "I'm afraid you're going to have to tell John Chop that he has not seen a wonderful bird. It's a bird that people have had in their cages, and it's escaped. And you have to see that same bird for 10 years, and then you can talk about it, but don't do it." So I had to phone John Chop and said, "Well, I'm afraid I'm going to puncture your little guess here." And so, of course, he couldn't do it. But there are others of that. Now, like one year here, oh gosh, I guess it was about 5 years ago, I woke up one morning And there was a terrible noise going on across the road and down a bit. And I thought, that's a bird that's screaming and hollering, what's it doing? Well, I got in the car, drove down, and it was getting down farther. Well, our son Chris lives down a little farther, and he phoned me. He said, you should get here, see what I've got in my backyard. Well, it was the
Cranes?
sandhill cranes, and can they ever make a noise? Well, I was delighted because we phoned John Chop again because he's so interested, and it started doing its dance. Well, I've seen that in TV, but I've never seen a real bird do it. And I pretty near started to cry. I was so excited. Well, we phoned Nigel about it too, because he is the top guy really for it. And he said, do you know, I've seen them before, but I've never seen one dance.
Funny.
And I said, well, there you go. You had to come to Pemberton to see something, don't you? But Nigel is that's his life, the birds.
Yeah.
When he tried, well, 3 years ago, he got that he was going as the doctor to one of the things that goes up country. Well, he got busy and he's got every book in the world on them. And he found that there were 12 birds up towards the Arctic where they were going that he hadn't seen yet. So instead of going to Africa and all over and paying people to come and, help you, he took the job. And I think he's seen most of them now. But did any of you go to his talk there at the new? Yeah, well, it was fascinating because I knew that if it had been me, I'd have had to have my book in my hand. But he had about 8 different penguins, and he said, okay, this one's got orange and blue and something, and that's this one here, and good old Nigel, I said, I stood up and I said, well, I read Nigel's life list last year. 5,450 birds. And I said to him, have you got any of these written down and put in the bank in your... He says, what would I do that for? I said, well, if your apartment catches on fire and you lose that book. He says, I'd remember what I did. I thought, oh, for heaven's sake. But no, but when I said this to the crowd, well, we have sort of a joke going that I am his adopted mother. And if he misbehaves, I said, okay, I'm going to give you one, on the side of the ear. And the time he was at the thing there, I'd been down having an acupuncture treatment. And he held off until I got there. And I didn't know any of the seniors that were there. But he came over and he gives me a big hug, and this is my grandmother, And the one lady said to me, you must feed him well. I said, yeah, he sort of likes my ginger snaps. And that's the extent of it. But no, he got going one year, it was sort of comical, with the paddlers. They were in 1 Mile Lake. Well, he lives just there in that apartment across the road. And he wanted to get them to stop paddling in 1 Mile Lake. And I said, why would they do that? Well, because I was out there the other day, he says there was 28 ducks on that thing, and they're scaring them away. I said, well, they don't give a darn about the ducks. They just figure that they're hurting the water. That creek, that lake was fixed up for the public, not for birders. Oh. So he had brought a letter up that he wanted to send to Dr. Fisher, and he wanted me to check it. Being a teacher, I had to have a red pencil somewhere. And I said, no, you can't do it. Well, he gets a little stubborn about things, and when my grandson was in the Grand Dragons, he was there, and Nigel had decided to make up a little thing for each paddler, and he was going to write the name of what it was he had seen. And then he wanted the paddlers to tuck it into the front of their pants. And Ryan said, my grandson, I'm darned if I'm doing that. Well, I don't think any of the kids opened the things at all, so that sort of passed over. But he is wonderful at it, and I shouldn't say anything against him, but I know he was, well, his mom and dad are still alive in Africa, and his dad gave him a bird book and a list when he was 7 years old, and that's when he started. So he's seen all over the world and knows all about them, and we get, when they go now, Shelley is with them, and they take pictures. And they come up to the house when they get home, and she shows us all the pictures. The last one that I saw, I was really pleased. They had gone and gotten supplies for one of the schools in Africa. And Nigel took over a whole bunch of footballs and books and pencils and stuff, and they had one picture of him out playing football with all of the children. So, you know, he really did, you know, he was happy about it. But they had, he used to send me a postcard pretty well every time he saw something interesting, and he had one bird he really wanted to see. And he wrote on the thing that, well, he hadn't spotted one, but Shelley did. And he says, so I told her, no, that's not what that one is. Left it at that, so, no, he's quite a man with it. For, like, if he comes up to our place, he's busy as a thing because there's birds flitting around all over, and oh man, look at that.
So Ruth, does the birding group get together regularly?
They do.
Or?
We do when it's time to say how many birds you saw at Christmas or whatever it is, and that's about it. So I had an embarrassing thing over that. The first time I went to it, we were at the Nailers, and one fellow, okay, now what, not Weldon, but Talbot.
Eldon.
Huh?
Eldon?
No, the young Gail's older boy. Neil. He had taken a course in paper, making things for the paper. But before he got right at it, he was doing this from Squamish. Well, we were at the thing. He came and sat by us because we're sort of half and related, really. But I said, you were to call out how many of this and that you saw. And I said, well, I had seen 45 of American crows. And the man that was keeping track of it said, how do you know it was an American crow? Well, that sort of ticked me. And I said to the boy, I knew it was an American crow because I went out and whistled the national anthem. And they all stood at attention. And the little braggy got out to Whistler on the weekend and put it all in the paper. You know? It was just really comical. But no, there's all sorts of little things like that come up that you get going, and there's several people in the valley now that are taking lots of pictures of the birds. And I heard here the other day, I guess it was Gary that said that John Chop has seen some sort of a bird up on the mountain. Do you remember what it is?
It's a bunting, the indigo bunting.
Oh, the indigo bunting. And it's quite possible because he spends his life now taking pictures of birds, and that's it. So I get a kick out of him. He really does take good pictures. The first time he took pictures, we had a bird up on the top of our barn, and he took a picture of it. But you can't tell what bird it is. It was so, and now, boy, you can tell every one of them. They're just beautiful. And when they go away for a holiday now, they take their trailer, and he goes down to California and all over and takes pictures all over the place. It's really quite a thing, so happy for him. I know he hasn't been too well in the last while, and he seems like he's still doing all right, but whatever it is that he's having, it's something that has come from his father's side of the family, so I
was gonna say to Nikki that there is a group that meets in June and goes around to all the different places.
Yeah.
That's where we saw the Sora.
yeah.
And it's a group of guys that have been doing that survey for 30 years. They start at Whistler and they stop every 4
Yes.
miles.
Yeah.
No, it's
So how,
amazing.
if people want to get involved in birding, how do they
Hugh Naylor
do it?
usually lets us all know.
Yeah.
So
Hugh
there is
Naylor.
like if you're on an email with Hugh, he lets everybody know.
And
Okay.
Ed Jaguar up in Darcy, because you see the eagles all along the Lillooet when you drive in. And like every time I drive in, today there was a young eagle, and there's always an eagle flying over me. I had a car accident about 16 years ago, and it seems like being medicine woman of Nkwakwa, it seems like Brother Eagle is always there making sure I get along every time I go down the road. And this was a young one today, because they like the salmon on the Birkenhead there.
We were watching one at our lunch table today before we came, and it flew out of one of our trees and ended up at the very top of one of our
Yes.
great big cedars. Next thing we knew, it had dived down into the creek trying to catch a fish.
Yeah.
But it didn't catch it, so there you go. But no, we've had a lot of that too, the birds eating the suckers and stuff that are in the creek, and they really enjoy it.
What about those cranes? That was just a one-shot deal, wasn't it? The year
Yeah, they were
in the
there for
valley?
2 years, and
Oh,
the
2
trouble,
years, okay.
trouble is that they're too busy. Oh, like our son rents the place at the back to plant potatoes and hay and stuff, and there's just too much. There never was very many. I think 7 was the most.
And did they used to come every year? Because what
Just for the 2 years.
just because I remember Clifford Ronan said they hadn't been here for 47 years or something in
Oh.
the valley.
Yeah, well, he was here before I was, that's for sure. But I can remember, what's her name? The teacher that went up country. Edith.
Edith and
Yeah.
Steve, yeah.
She wrote me a note. No, she phoned me. She says, Ruth, you're not going to believe this, but there are sandhill cranes going over our place, and there's about 400 of them a day. And it's
that's
just
a
so
lot.
wonderful. I just had to tell you, and I thought, well,
Their wings are really long.
oh yeah. But boy, can they make a noise.
They can.
Oh, they're just screaming at
But I like the way they dance.
you.
I've
Yes,
seen it.
yeah. Well, that's what I said. I like
Bounce
to
up and down and
yeah, they really
put
go.
their necks around each other. It's really,
Yeah.
they're really pretty
Getting
to look at.
acquainted. Hi, remember me? Oh,
It looks so pretty, especially when they're bouncing up and down and their wings are fluttering around.
Yeah, well, it's
Richmond's got a lot of wild birds there.
Who has?
Richmond,
Oh
We
yeah.
have a lot of hummingbirds.
Oh, we have
they
lots
have birds
too.
that'll even come right up to your
My son
hand.
has two.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
they
we
come
had
a lot.
quite
I
a few
didn't think
birds,
hummingbirds
wild
would come
birds
this
down
time
in
of year.
Ladner,
Let
but
it be gone back.
not that as many as
Well, I
there
guess
is
they
here,
stay here.
so.
Not always.
Do they?
We have families that
So-
come year after year.
We
get to
have
know
two.
them.
Does
Different
anyone else
families.
have any questions for
Some
Ruth?
got yellow on it, some got red on it.
Yeah, well,
Hummingbirds.
up
My
at our
son has the
place,
red ones and I have the ones with the yellow.
yeah, well, there's a different
China.
one in,
They come from China?
no,
That's called it.
up country in, say, oh, shoot,
100 Mile House.
up the valley
Oh.
farther. But I've only seen them at our place once.
Oh, they're at
In
our-
fact, Rhea
Every night at
Sankey,
4 o'clock.
yeah,
You can
when
take
Rhea
pictures.
Sankey was still alive, she
Four
was
o'clock.
at the house and she said, Ruth, look at that baby up there in the tree. I said, Rhea, there's no babies yet. They're still on the nest.
Yeah.
Well, here it was the hummingbird that comes to Darcy. And I guess it's blowing up here, so nevertheless.
I mixed up next to sugar.
Yeah, but no,
Did Nigel Matthews
One
say
cup of
that
sugar, 1 cup of water.
Pemberton has the second most birds in
4
all
cups of
lower
water.
BC
4
compared
cups
to
of
the
water.
Okanagan, after the Okanagan?
I don't know.
I thought I heard him say that once.
Well, Molly just sent me
Oh.
this year's booklet for about the birds, and I was sort of pleased to get it. But I keep all those ones that I have got them for several years because if I get thinking, well, now what is that bird's name? I can look at one of those and get it faster than I can out of my books. So there you go. But no, I don't think there's any danger of birding, getting worse. It's like at our place there, after Dave and Elmer took the back fence out, we have grass right down to the creek. Well, I can stand there at my window, where I'm supposed to be doing dishes, and watch, say, 24 robins. They just love it because it's damp. Yeah,
The worms.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it's, but now they're busy with their mouths full of worms, lugging them off to their babies, so.
Oh, and I can hear the little robins.
So this would be their
The one at
second
back,
nest, wouldn't it? Would this be their second
I think
round
it's still
nest?
their first one.
Oh, okay.
But I had one thing going on here. Well, the creek is beginning to fill in now, and the government won't allow us to do anything with it. But in the spring, if it's been a bad spring, the water comes up and it goes across this lawn, about 4 inches of it. And I was busy baking cookies one day and looked out and there was a duck with her babies in this, and they were splashing around having a great old time. Then a wood duck came along with her babies and they all splashed around. This kept going. And then one of the common mergansers came. And those other birds wouldn't allow their children to play with the common mergansers. And I thought, oh, you sure got your nose in the air. They just wouldn't let them play with those little kids. But, of course, I burned a plate of cookies over all this because I was so busy watching I forgot I had them in the oven, so. Ah, dear.
Have you seen harlequin ducks? I know there's some up
Oh,
Bryan
yeah,
Creek.
yes.
They have to be in water that's rushing, isn't that right? Harlequin ducks?
Yeah, I haven't seen them.
Yeah, I don't think they're in the valley bottom. Somebody
No.
said they're at mile 13 or whatever it is up Ryan Creek.
Yeah. Well, for a couple of years there, 3 years or more, we had lots of wood ducks coming.
They're beautiful.
Well, they're beautiful, is right.
Yeah.
And David would
They're
go
called
to
old
his
squaws.
oat bin and bring me a big pail of oats, and I'd go down and put it out on. And they'd come right up and eat. They didn't care about you, but I haven't seen one in the creek this year. So I think it's because the water is getting, it's just getting so. We had, here when we had one of the potato days, Noel Roddick and his wife, who was in Victoria for years, they came to our potato thing, and they always did. And they came up to me and said, would you mind if we go and use your bathroom to put our bathing suits on? I said, well, fine, help yourself. So they got out there and they had a bit of a splash, and they came back and said, that creek's getting very shallow. I said, yes, the government won't allow us to do anything with it. So she says, well, why don't you do it on the weekend? There's none of them work on the weekend. I thought, oh, boy. But, we've tried to do various things. We have got, well, Dave did one time. He got a scooper in and he scooped out one part that's 8 feet deep. So then, of course, you have to watch for every kid that comes to the place. So nevertheless, there's still some of them around doing their things, and I don't know. I just, like right now, my favorite bird is the lazuli bunting.
I like the yellow canaries.
And it's beautiful. And he comes, my husband tells me, he comes 7 o'clock every morning to the feeder. Well, his wife's got a nest across the creek. She comes once in a while.
Maybe you've got mine, I don't have one anymore.
He is so pretty, and the way birds go,
Yeah.
she's just plain Jane. It's, she has got a little bit of blue on her. But if I hadn't checked a book, I never would have thought that she was the wife of that lazuli bunting. We had quite a time, well, it was, I don't know, say 5 years ago, there was rather an easy winter went on. And one day, Dave, my son, came up and said, Mom, get your book, get your binoculars, we're going looking for birds. So I did. And it had, all the snow was so thin on the fields that it had all gone away. Well, then the poor little mice didn't have anything to cover them. So we got down the road a bit and so busy trying to keep track of all these birds, and Dave would say, well, that one is a such and such hawk. I said, no, it's not. You count how many stripes there are in the tail. It's not. So we ended up at Van Loon's, and there were hawks flying everywhere. And you just couldn't keep track of the darn things. It was really comical. But Dave lets on like, this birding bit. And next thing I know, come on, Mom, let's go out and look for this bird and that bird. It's just a bunch of hot air. So. No, he's the one in our family that keeps things going, I tell you. He's got remarks all the time. And mind you, we have another one right here. She does quite well, so. Yeah, and Chris, he's down the road and always busy working, so nevertheless. Yeah.
Well, Ruth, we really appreciate you coming to tell us about birding in
Oh,
Pemberton.
good, no
Could you
problem.
tell me one question? How long does a thrush stay? A thrush. How long does it stay? Because I have one that comes in my feeder every, well, after the snow was more or less gone.
Yeah,
They don't seem to stay very long. They're a very flighty bird.
yeah.
They're scared of
don't
everything.
know.
They're scared of everything.
Do they
Yeah.
have very many yellow canaries around here?
Yep.
Quite a few,
Ontario,
lots of
there's a lot.
times there
I
is.
haven't seen one here yet.
What
But in
I get a
Ontario-
kick out of is the little pine cisterns. Well, we have about 30 of them that come to our little feeder. Well, then say like, one of the bigger birds comes and those little ones, they're the smallest bird there is, they chase those big ones right out of the thing. They're not gonna let them have anything. So it's fascinating.
Yeah.
We call them I can't think of it now, but the ones that are on the road a lot.
Siskins, pine siskins.
Yeah, but no, there's a name,
Kamikazes.
kamikaze, because they're the ones that get on the road and eat and they won't move. Because when a truck comes along. So,
They don't know.
no, they're really cute. They love to eat the dandelions when they've turned to seed. That's one of their big things.
Yeah, I
So,
didn't sit you.